Good evening, happy Tuesday, happy Tuesday. Welcome once again to our Tuesday webcast. These days, it feels as if it was just like 3, 4 days ago. It was Tuesday, and now we're back here. These are just moving so quickly. But anyhow, happy to have you back here at Etienne's place, and my name is David Etienne, owner CEO of Etienne Business Solutions. And as usual, I like to always remind you and invite you to check out our YouTube channel, Etienne's Place, where we have a long list of presentation videos on all different topics and subject matters, business related, of course, that I think you'll find to be quite helpful, useful. So check our YouTube channel, Etienne's Place. Like, subscribe, share, and of course, for yourself, be informed, be empowered. That is always my emphasis. Be informed, be empowered. That's where it comes from. Okay? Get the information. It's all there. Good. Last Tuesday, I spent quite a bit of time looking at this whole concept of break-even analysis. And essentially, I more emphasized on us determining a revenue level that we need to establish given our costs. So I spoke about variable cost, I spoke about fixed cost, and then I emphasized that we ought to take the necessary measures to ensure that the revenue that we generate is at least equal to the total of those costs so that we break even, or better yet, because that's what we're about, that the revenue generated exceeds those variable plus fixed costs so that we can make a profit. That's what we're here for. We're in business to make a profit. Fine. So yes, I'd more emphasize the revenue, the income side of things. Today, I want to look at the other side of the coin, so to speak. I want to spend some time looking at costs. And so today's video cast is really entitled Managing Your Costs. Managing costs. Today's video cast, Managing Costs. It is true that at the forefront of the mind of any business person is, how do I go about generating more income, more revenue, more business? I want to grow the company, and so I want to find ways to increase my income, increase my revenue. That is good. But you'll agree with me that although increasing revenue is a positive indicator, at the end of the day, the true measure of your growth is what is left after you have covered all the costs out of that revenue. So then the profit is really what matters, because just a simple number, if I make a $1 million revenue this year and I have $950,000 of expenses, then my profit, my surplus is just $50,000. On the other hand, if my revenue is 100,000 and my total cost is only 20,000, then I would have made a profit of 80,000. So you see, I end up with a larger profit here, which is 80 compared to 50,000, although my revenue is significantly less. So it's just a numbers game. Now, within the context of waning revenue, okay, decreased revenue, because that's the reality of the economy. So maybe couple of years back, when it was easy for you to make a certain level of income for the year, $500,000, 750,000, etc., you're finding that because of a lot of variables, both micro variables and macro variables, things outside of your control, you're really not making those revenue targets anymore. you find instead of getting your 600,000 revenue, 500,000, you're barely making $300,000 revenue. And you try everything you do, pull out all the stops, do whatever you can, but it's just the reality of the market. It's just the reality of the economy right now that, not much is happening. So you have actually tried everything you can to increase revenue. And so you are at a revenue level where until things change, then that's basically going to be what your revenue is looking like. So therefore, we're saying that I have done all I can to increase my revenue. So let me then look at the other side of the coin. Let us look at the cost side of it. And so this evening, we're going to be looking at managing costs. Now, last week again, I spoke about costs and I spoke about variable costs and fixed costs. And I spoke to those costs in the context of break-even analysis. And just for information, where we look at cost structures, variable costs, fixed costs, and we discuss them in the context of break-even analysis, that is referred to as variable costing. Variable costing. That's just what it's called. You see, because you will realize, if you're interested, that costing can be looked at in various ways, and depending on the industry and depending on the task and the activity that is in question, then the costing methodology will be different. So we have break-even analysis, and what is conducive to break-even analysis as far as cost is concerned is really variable costing. Today, I'm going to focus on standard costing. And this type of costing or cost analysis is more appropriate for when I'm talking about preparing budgets. The fact that I said earlier on that we're at the point where we have no way to increase our revenue much further than where it's at least for now, then we need to look at cost containment. And in cost containment, we want to look strictly at our budget. And in looking at our budget, we want to be looking at things like variances. So I'm going to touch on standard costing, managing our costs, and a little bit of variance analysis. Cool. Standard costing. The beauty about a lot of these topics when I present them is that the terminology actually speaks for itself. Okay, so we're talking about standard costing. And so the word standard tells you that something is established, something has been determined, something has been seen as firm, determined, fixed kind of thing. So standard costing. Standard costing is basically you, the business person, determining, or let me even use the term, predetermining, if there's such a thing, predetermining what the costs are likely to be for you to undertake a certain activity. Standard costing quite often is used in the production arena, the productive sector. So let us say that you are in the business of making chairs. Okay, let's keep it simple. You're in the business of making chairs. Of course, I'm going to use just three things. There's nail, there's board, and there's glue. Chair. Nail, board, glue, chair. And let us say that you have three different styles of chair that you produce. So style A, style B, style C. You would have determined to produce style A, I need so much board, so many nails, so much glue. That's the material. To do B, so much nails, so much board, so much glue. To do C, so much etc. So basically, you'd have established a standard as to the amount of material that need to go into either chair A, chair B, chair C. Good. That's the material. You would also say, okay, because there are different chairs and maybe have different little fanciness to them, the amount of labor, workmanship, the amount of labor hours, the amount of hours that a typical laborer need to spend on producing chair 1 could be, say, 6 hours here, 8 hours there, 3 hours here. So you'd have established what is the standard material that needs to go into each of the 3 chair models. You'd have determined how much hours of labor need to go into each of the 3 chair models. Having established the material, nail, board, glue, in terms of quantity to put in A, B, or C, you would then be able to say, okay, the quantity of nail would cost X dollars. The quantity of board would cost Y dollars. The quantity of glue would cost Z. You do the same thing for B, you do the same thing for C. So if you notice, I have established my standard material that goes into this product. Because I was able to do that, then I look at what would be the cost. And so I was able to establish the standard cost of the material. So, follow me, I established the standard quantity of material to go into each chair. Then I established the standard price of the materials going into each chair. Quantity, price. I've determined that. Then I come to the workman, the labor. And I say, okay, I have determined that this chair will take 4 hours to manufacture. This chair will take 3 hours. This chair will take 6 hours. So I have established the standard amount of time that will go into it. So I say I've determined my standard labor that goes into the production of each of the chair models. Now, once I determine how many hours will go into A or B or C, then given the labor rate, the rate of pay, the per hour that you pay your laborer, you can say, okay then, having established the standard hours for each chair, knowing the rate of pay per hour for labor, I can determine simple arithmetic. It's not even mathematics, it's arithmetic. I can determine then what will be the standard labor cost that will go into each chair. Pretty simple, pretty simple. You read it in the literature, it may look all cumbersome and difficult, but simple. So if you notice, we have established several standards. Standard material, and let's just even focus on chair A. For chair A, I have established standard material that needs to go into chair A. The standard cost of the material that needs to go into chair A. Standard hours that need to go into chair A. Because I know the cost per hour for labor, I've established the standard labor cost that goes into chair A. Cool. There may be other costs, yes, involved in producing that chair, but let us just keep it very simple. Let's assume that it is just the material and the labor that give us a finished chair, a finished product. So if you notice, even before producing 1 unit of chair A, I was able to predetermine what the cost of chair A ought to be. Yeah, and I do that same thing for chair B and chair C. So before you know it, I establish a standard cost for each of my product. So assuming everything works according to plan, which it never does, then when I actually produce a chair A, a chair B, or a chair C, the cost of each of those will come exactly to what I had predetermined. This was theoretical, if it was a perfect world, but we're coming to the real world, okay? But what I have done is to establish standards upfront. Now, let us move right now to look at budget, and I'm going to keep it simple. We're going to assume that all we're doing is producing a budget for the production of chair A. Because whatever we do for chair A, we just have to replicate it for B, C, D. The principle is the same. Chair A. Now that I predetermine the input cost, the input quantity of material, the cost of the material, the input labor in the chair, the cost of labor, I have now established the standard cost of producing 1 unit of chair A. So if my plan for the year is to produce 10,000 chairs of A, 10,000 units of A, then my chair production budget, which is my production budget, is going to be whatever the 1 unit would cost me, multiply by 10,000, and I come up with a budget, which is my standard budget for producing, whatever, I always forget the number I'm using, 101,000 chair, okay? But you get the concept, okay? So once you establish the standard cost of the things that go into making the product, then you know, okay, the standard cost is such, so if I multiply it by the quantity that I intend to produce, then I will come up with what would be my standard budget. Fine. So that's what I do. I establish that, and I have my budget. Then now come time for me to produce. Yep, I'm going to be producing. So I go and I buy material, and I buy X number of board, nail, glue, and I call the guys and I say, man, I need, laborers to come, and I say, and etc. etc. Everybody's on spot. But when I went to the hardware store, because maybe I prepared that budget today, and by the time I'm ready to produce, it's like maybe 2 weeks later. And because of the fickleness of our economy and price fluctuations, so I go to the hardware store when I say, okay, sell me X number of a quantity of board, of nails, of glue. Maybe in my mind, I'm saying, okay, I just got an order for 10 chairs. So because I had already predetermined the standard cost of producing 1 chair, then I just need to do the cost for 1 times 10, and it gives me the total amount that I'm expecting to spend when I go to buy the material and when I engage the laborers. So I go to the hardware store and I buy material for 10 chairs, which will be the nail, glue, board, and I take it back to my shop. When I go and I look, I say, hold on, why is this invoice looking like this? And realize that the invoice is actually 10% higher cost-wise than what I had projected it to be based on the standards that I had preset. When I call in my laborers and I say, okay, guys, it's going to take, etc., etc., at the end of the day, I find that my labor cost is more. What is happening here? Suddenly, the actual costs of whether material or labor end up being more than what my standard, my predetermined standard is, or standards are, since it was material and labor. And I'm saying to myself, what is happening here? So I need to now step back and do a little bit of analysis. The analysis is to say, whereas I had predetermined that the standard quantity of board and nail and glue was whatever it is, I realized that when I went, I had to get a little more board. Actually, the chair took a little more board, a few more nails, a bit more glue. So right away, I find that my standard quantity of material compared to my actual quantity of material that I had to buy differs. The actual quantity that I end up buying to satisfy 1 chair end up being a little more than what I thought, what I had budgeted it to be. That's on the quantity side. It's also possible that in addition to the quantity fluctuation, I could find, as I indicated earlier, that the prices are different. So nail is costing a little more, glue is costing a little more, the board costs a little more. And so when I come and I compare to what I had as my standard cost, I find that I spend some more money. The labor is supposed to be $20 per hour based on my standard. The guy said, no, boss, we're not working for less than $25 per hour. Because maybe that's what the market is offering. That's a going rate in the market now. And so you end up saying that, oh, whereas I budgeted, I'd established a standard labor cost of so much. No, the actual is a different number. So follow me now. If I just look at all that standard budget that I had prepared, I had predetermined that a chair would have cost me $100 to build. That $100 has all the costs built into it as a standard. By the time I finish building this chair, I see it come out to a cost of $120. Cost overrun. I need now to look and see, okay, let us analyze, let us discover the factors that contributed to that cost overrun. And so when you hear people talk about variance analysis, fancy term, they just want to convolute your head. Variance analysis is nothing more than this thing varies or differs from that thing. Let us investigate and find out the reason why this thing varies or is different from that thing. Simple. Okay? Okay? When you mix some juice, some lemonade, which is supposed to be lime, sugar, and water, and it tastes away, and then somebody else do the same lime, sugar, and water, and it tastes different, maybe it tastes nicer, you say, okay, what is that causing her to taste a little better? And when you say, okay, how much lime did you squeeze in it? She say, okay, that amount. How much sugar did you use? That amount. You say, oh, you know what? She used a little more lime than I did. Oh, she put less sugar than I did. What have you done? Variance analysis. You have analyzed what is it that called a variance in the flavor between your lemonade and the other person's lemonade. Nothing more. Okay, so textbook threw a variance analysis to you on fancy jargon. And yeah, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. It is true that some of these things can be very technical and they have their right technical places. Okay, I'm not underplaying that, but I'm saying that the concept can be broken down into basic, chewable, digestible pieces that you can apply in your normal daily operations. Let's continue. So now I am doing a variance analysis to basically identify what is causing the cost difference. And so the cost difference could be because I thought the quantity would be that, the quantity is this. Or should I start with this and then say that? The price should be this. Based on my standard and my budget, the real price is that. The labor cost I thought would have been this, the labor cost is actually that. And so that is how I come to understand why there's a difference in price. Once I discover that, I need to go one step further. Is there a way for me to get these prices down in the future? So now that I know what is happening, is there a way for me to get the price? Maybe I could try to source cheaper material, although be careful, because I know we don't want to compromise quality. Should I try to find cheaper labor, but just as skilled? I'm trying to find some way to get material and labor at a cost that is hopefully, if not exactly what I projected based on my standard, but pretty close, pretty close. I'm going to try to do that so that I do not continue incurring this higher than budgeted cost in the future. But there's another component that I need to be mindful about. Is it possible that the actual cost of material and the actual cost of labor are correct costs? It's just that I, in preparing my standard budget based on what I consider to be the standard cost, I miscalculated. I have error in my estimations. So that is it. So sometimes when we look at variances, and I'm going to soon talk a little bit more about positive and negative, right? But I just jumped into the negative concept right now. The fact that I was expecting to spend $10 and I end up spending $12, we're going to say it's a negative variance because my cost is $2 more than I was bargaining for. So it's a negative variance. Back to what I was saying. The fact that there's a $2 negative variance, yes, I can seek to find ways of cutting down the actual cost, but I need to stop and ask myself, as I said, is it a case that the variance of $2 is not because those costs are exorbitant, but because I, in doing my initial estimates and my initial standard costing to establish my initial standard budget, I miscalculated. I underestimated, because it could mean that in order to get rid of this variance, the solution is not necessarily to go seek cheaper material or cheaper labor. It is a case that I need to go back to my standard budget and modify it to be more realistic to what obtains in the market. I may have been using some data that is outdated, and so I need to use current data, and I may find out, okay, I was actually underestimating this, undervaluing that, and that is why I come with such a variance. And whatever it is I discover, then I will make the necessary adjustments to try to remove that variance. The principle of variance analysis begs that not only that it should be done conscientiously by all business persons, to always look and ask, well, that is again assuming if you had gone to prepare some sort of budget. It doesn't have to be anything, technical, just a simple budget so that you can compare your actual against the budget. So assuming that you did this budget, then it is key, very important, always to look, to do an analysis, to do a review, to say, okay, some people do it month over month. Some people do it quarter by quarter. You may say, okay, last quarter it was this quarter. What is it that's causing it to be different when all should be basically the same? You will realize that, okay, prices have gone up, etc., etc. That's an analysis of why there is a variation. Let's talk about positive and negative variance now. Simple. If I'm talking strictly up, because we can have variance analysis for just about anything. Variance analysis for revenue, variance analysis for production, variance analysis for, can't think of anything right now, but yeah, a lot of things. But we're focusing on costs. So if I'm talking about a variance in cost, then naturally, whenever I have real costs that are greater, real costs that are greater than what I had projected in my standard budget, then it's going to be a negative variance. Of course, if we have to spend more money than I bargained for, it must be a negative because it hurt my stomach, it hurt my chest, ouch, you get me? So it's a negative variance. The opposite is true. The opposite is true. It is possible that when we manufacture this chair, whereas we thought it would cost us $100 to manufacture, we find that it comes out at $80. No, you're going to say, wow, this is a positive variance because I end up spending only $80, whereas I thought I would have had to spend $100. Hip, hip, hooray. We come out at $20 less. Let's go home. No, can't go home yet. The principle is that when it's a positive variance, it also must be investigated. Yeah. A positive variance, which is something that is beneficial to you, still needs to be investigated. You still need to know, why is it? What has caused me to come out better than I had anticipated? Again, you go back. Is it that for whatever reason, the way I got my supply of board, etc., etc., is it a case where, it was a special that I got then? And if it was a special, then maybe it's just a one-off thing. And when I go back for more board and more nail, it will be at the regular price. So my enjoying a positive variance now may be short-lived. I need to investigate it. Is it possible that because it may be, work is hard to find, then laborers are saying, all right, man, although my price is really $25 per hour, boy, based on how things are, I'll take $20. And if you had budgeted for $25 per hour in your standard budget, and the guy say, okay, I'll take $20, then naturally your actual labor cost is going to be less than what you projected, which was your standard. Again, that will result in a positive variance. But you want to know the reason behind the positive variance. Because as I said before, if it's a case where the guy say, okay, man, no work is going on, so I'll take anything, I'll settle for $20. Be mindful that this positive variance may not last for long. Because maybe when you go to the same place to get laborers, because there's a upsurge in available jobs, the guy may say, okay, no boss, no, $20 was last month, $25 is the minimum that will move me from here. Again, so that positive variance was very short-lived. Why is that important? If you had used this positive variance to decide to go back to your standard budget and say, okay, whereas I had budgeted for $25, maybe I can really change my budget down to $20 to reflect the fact that the guy is only charging $20 and I have you'd be in for a shock, because the minute you change your budget down, if that lower labor cost was a temporary situation, then you'll find by the next time around, you're gone in the opposite direction. Negative variance. So you're going to jump back again to adjust your budget. No. So you always want to investigate a variance, be it positive, be it negative. The other key thing, justification or reason why you should always investigate your positive variances is that if it is something that you are doing right, or if it is something that you're doing better than you used to do it, if it's a level of efficiency that you have developed that you did not have before, that is causing you to have a positive variance, wouldn't you want to investigate it to find out exactly what have I done different this time? So that you can replicate it in future periods? Yeah, you want to know what did we do or not do that caused us to have this positive outcome. And so what we find out is because sometimes some crazy thoughts come in my head and I don't say no, but anyhow, if you realize that it's because you woke up earlier and decided that you're going to put in one more hour in early morning than you used to, that gives you such a positive result, you may say, oh wow, so that is the contributing factor for my positive variance. So if I want to continue having positive variances, let us continue with this practice, with this habit of putting in one more hour early morning kind of thing. So that is basically what we're looking at. Again, all variances must or need to be investigated. Quick recap. So we're saying that at the end of the day, business is nothing more than three components. The whole face, the picture, the anatomy of business come down to three. Back in my neck of the woods when I'm from, let's say dege. Means simply nothing more than that. It comes down to three components: revenue, if you want to call it income, if you want to call it earnings, whatever, the money you make. Component two, the costs that you incur. Three, the bottom line. If the money you make is more than the cost you incur, the bottom line will be a surplus, you make a profit. If the money you make is less than the money that you spend out for all your costs. Bottom line is a negative, you've made a loss. Bottom line. Cool. It means, therefore, you can see, since I have, you see, if you notice, the bottom piece is determined by what the first two are saying. So income, expenses, depending on what they are saying, the profit or loss is the resulting variable. So you can never determine profit or loss independently of income and expense. You have to know income, know, not N-O, K-N-O-W. Know it. You have to know what is your income, know what is your costs, expenses. Then having known these two components, then when you offset one against the other, the profit or the loss will be determined. Cool. Average businessman is always focusing more often than not on the top number, the revenue. I want to find a way to grow my sales. I want to get into new markets so we can expand this, expand that. I said, it's all about how do we increase revenue? How do we increase sales? And yes, it ought to be so. It ought to be so. In addition to that, however, you have to be mindful of cost, the second component of containing your cost. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to find ways of growing my revenue exponentially, only to find that my cost is growing at the same rate. Because if it's growing at the same rate, then naturally, my profit or loss bottom line position is not going to change. Simple example. If my revenue is $10 and my cost is $4, my profit is $6. Follow me. 6, 10, 4, 6. If I do something and I grow my revenue to $20, and I realize now that my cost is $14, what is my revenue? $6. No difference. Same $6. So that growth in revenue, because it is offset by a commensurate growth in expenses or costs. So we want to definitely, yes, look about growing that top piece, but containing the cost piece so that the bottom line can come. So having said that, we say the focus here is on managing that second piece, the cost. And one of the ways for us to do it is through the principle of standard costing, where we try to predetermine what will be the cost of certain things so that when we have actual numbers, we can compare them to the cost, the budgeted cost, to know whether or not we are in line, we are above those budgeted costs, or we are below them. Quite often, you will never have it just equal. It's either going to be a little more or a little less. Those are variances. Positive variance when the cost is less than projected. Negative variance when the cost is more than projected. Whether it be a positive variance or a negative variance, it ought to be investigated. You need to know the reason behind that fluctuation, that difference between budgeted and actual. Okay? Because that will help you to do one of two things. Take action to modify those actual numbers to see if you can bring them back in line more to what your budget was, or take a critical look at your budget to find out if your budget is not realistic. Maybe your budget is just not realistic, you see? And quite often you find that happening in construction projects, right? Construction projects. As a matter of fact, the two pieces impact construction projects. Sometimes, you have what you call your quantity person, your project accountant, who will go through and create what you call, the bills, or whatever you call them, the quantities, determine quantity of this, quantity of that, quantity of steel, quantity of block, cement, blah, blah, blah. That's the material. Determine the cost for these things. So once you put all the quantities up for electrical, for plumbing and things, and then you put the prices beside the quantities, you come up now with an estimate of the cost of building this house. Then you start to build and you're buying things and you find out, oh boy, we did underestimate the amount of steel you need in a boss. You're going to have to take another truckload of steel, you know. Boy, so the house have 5 bathrooms, but there's only 3 toilets with the budget for. Well, maybe we need to build a outhouse, eh? Outhouse. But no. So right away we realize that the quantity of toilet fixtures is not adequate. So we have to modify that. Those are examples where you have error in your estimation. You have errors in your standards. You have error in your budgeting. On the other hand, assuming that you are budgeted correctly, then the variance will arise from the fact that when you go to the places to buy the windows and the doors and the toilet fixtures, they say you find that the prices, man, have gone up, which more often is what is happening where you have such significant cost escalation, in construction projects. All right. And so that is why with construction projects, man, you have to be on top of your game in terms of analyzing. This is not so directly related to what we're talking about, but since I mentioned about construction project, you have what you call the person who, like the project accountant, and what he would normally do is to look at 3 things: the costs incurred. Let's just say you're building a house. The costs incurred thus far, the percentage completion of the house, and the remaining costs to be incurred based on the budget. Because think about it. If you have a budget of $100,000 to build something, then you sort of say, okay, by the time we spend $20,000, we expect to be at this point. Another $20,000 should take us to this point. By the time we're at $80,000 spent, we should be roughly 80% complete. But if when you've gone 50% expenditure of your budget, you realize that the building is only 30% complete, then you're in problem. It's either that there has been significant cost escalations to cause you to spend much more money, and therefore you've only gone 30% construction, but you have spent 50% of budget, or on the other hand, you have done some incorrect estimation and budgeting, and so you need to go back and look at it. But of course, yeah, that's a story that no potential homeowner want to hear, especially when you have bought land and you're building on your own land and you get a general contract and it's coming to you now 4 months down the road and talk about, yeah, no, we did decide on a $800,000 budget for this, but boy, if you really want all the time you say you want, then it's going to be $1 million. Or if you can only stay at 800, then boy, we're going to have to maybe reduce some things, cut out some things, that kind of thing. We may not be able to give a bathroom for each bedroom. We may have to have some those kind of Jack and Jill shared kind of thing, just to see how we can keep within that predetermined budget and still deliver. So those are some of the things. But bottom line, the big principle or the big the story here, or the lesson here, is that even for us small business folks who are doing simple little things, it doesn't change the principle. Does not change the principle. We're dealing with 3 components that represent our business. We're trying to make some money. We have to incur costs in order to make the money. We're hoping that we're that good of a business people that when we compare the cost that we incur and the money we make in running the business, we hope that the money that we're making is greater than the cost, so that we come out with a profit. If we see it's not happening that way, we need to definitely look carefully to say, okay, what needs to be addressed? That's it. And so that, in a very simplified form, is standard costing. Standard costing, okay? Bearing in mind that there can be fluctuation either in actual quantities and actual costs, okay? That's it. So last week we looked at variable costing, although I did not call it variable costing back then, but it is really variable costing that we dealt with when we look at the whole break-even thing. Today we look at standard costing. Okay. Next week, I think I want to look at a different concept that is referred to as process costing. Process costing. Okay. I'll give you a quick little, yeah. Okay. 8:45. I'm wrapping up now. Give you a quick little tidbit. Process costing, man. I cannot stop saying this. And I just love how the terms used in these things just tell you what it's about. Process costing is just saying you're going through a process. This process has various stages. So the process begins here, it ends here. However, there are different stages in the process. And so what you're saying, instead of looking at the cost, the total cost from beginning to end, which is important, you still want to say, no, I want to break it down into smaller pieces. So I want to say, if this process have different components to it, then I want to see what was the cost incurred at step 1. What is the cost incurred at step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5? And naturally, you would think that when I add cost of step 1, cost of step 2, cost of step 3, etc., when I put them together, it would give me what is the total cost of the process. Yes and no. And I'm going to leave you with just this why it would be no, just for you to chew on until we meet next week. You ever hear about transfer? You hear people talk about transfer price. There's also transfer cost, meaning if I have a manufacturing line and we have different departments, just like a motor car, different departments working on different components of the product, it means that department 1 would have incurred X amount of cost. So when department 1 transferred that semi-finished thing to department 2 for continuation, what it has done is transfer all the costs that it created in department 1 would have been transferred to department 2. Yeah. And so department 2 add on more cost on it to do whatever they do, transfer to department 3. By the time department 3 get that his step of the process, he would have had something that has department 1's cost, department 2's cost, and he's now going to add on his third department 3 cost. So if you notice, at the end of the day, yes, it is a total cost, but each department is actually adding cost to cost that is coming into him. The only person who do not have that will be step 1. He starts fresh. So he accumulates all the costs. But once you have the first transfer, you're transferring the product to the next step in the process. But naturally, you're transferring the costs incurred at step 1 to step 2. That is added more cost to step 3, add more cost to step 4. And so there's a little science behind the whole concept of process costing, how we look at it, when is it best used, what we need to be looking out for. That's enough for today. So that's me, David Etienne, Etienne Business Solutions. We are a public accounting firm, and my name is David Etienne, yes, and we have our regular Tuesday videocast, and whatever we do here, I'm sure it can be found even at a later date on our YouTube channel, Etienne's Place. So I have some pre-recorded things there, and I know that the live sessions here are also sitting in my Etienne's Place YouTube platform channel. So go there, check them out, look at them, enjoy, share, like, subscribe. Of course, I would encourage you to subscribe so that you know exactly what's happening and when it is happening. So that's all for now, guys. I'm spending some time with you, and we do it again. You know, there's like a comic thing, kind of like a cartoon on television. At the end of it, Pinky and the Brain. You say, "Okay, boss, what are we gonna do tomorrow?" And the answer was, same as we do every day. Try to take over the world. So for us, next Tuesday, we'll be back here doing what we love to do, taking what can be complex subject matters, breaking it down into simple, digestible pieces, and see how it is applicable to even a small business person. Although when you look at them in the context of textbook, it sounds like, boy, this is just for the big boys. Boy, this is for corporates to deal with these kind of things. Yes, they deal with it, but it is applicable to just about any business, any business. This is David Etienne saying, Tata, God bless. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and I will meet you here next Tuesday for another webcast on Etienne Space. Bye for now.